Lane does a great job. He's extremely intelligent. He doesn't overthink things. He keeps it simple and doesn't think that you have to overthink things sometimes as a coach. And probably he doesn't get enough credit for that because he wants to beat you with the fundamentals. He wants to beat you with his players and doing things within their system. It's just he does a great job. He looks for matchups. He looks for explosive opportunities. They've been one of the most explosive offenses, run and pass, in the last 10 years in the SEC. They've broken some numbers that are out there. They've got a lot of snaps because they go with pace, but they do a good job with the snaps that they get. No, he probably doesn't get enough credit, but it's not like he's trying to be the scheme of the week. He does what he does really well, and he knows what they do well. He also knows what you don't do well, and he's looking for that matchup most of the game. So that was Kirby Smart on Lane Kiffin, who he has known for such a long time. Jackson Dart is the Rebs quarterback coming in this game. He got a little bit touched up against Texas A&M on Saturday, but I think he'll be fine to play in this game. And he really played pretty well against A&M. He is, for the season, he's going for 2,400 yards, almost 2,500 yards already, and 16 touchdowns. So capable quarterback. What else is new in this league? This is going to be a real challenge for Georgia, obviously. It's Ole Miss, they have definitely been up and down this year in terms of there have been situations where they did not play great against Texas A&M, and they did not play well against Auburn necessarily. They did not play well against Arkansas necessarily. Certainly did not play well against Alabama. They did play well offensively against LSU. I think the problem is defensively, they did not play well against LSU. They did not play well defensively against Texas A&M. And you're coming into a game with the number 6, something like that, offense in the country, which is Georgia. So that's going to be a real challenge for this Rebel defense. I think that might be the matchup more than anything where it's problematic for Ole Miss because Georgia again is number 6 in total offense, scoring offense number 10, just shy of 40 points. Ole Miss is not exactly allowed 40 points a lot. That's not been their MO, but they have permitted scoring sometimes. I mean, LSU has a better offense than Georgia, I would say. It might not seem like it sometimes, but they can really roll up some numbers. They scored 49 on Ole Miss. Now that was in Oxford, but still, and that's a rivalry game. That's kind of a weird deal. But then for Texas A&M, a team that, that was a game Ole Miss had complete control in, and for them to Texas A&M in league play has not scored more than 35 points this season. The only time that happened that they scored 35 was against Ole Miss. The other time they got close to that was Arkansas. So a bit of the red flag, if you want to call it that. I know I talk about red flags and flashing red lights a lot. But one of the moments you want to really watch for is Ole Miss's defense ready for what they're going to get into here? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. That's a tricky one because playing in Athens is very hard to do for the other team's offense, but the defenses often get rolled into momentum. And the Ole Miss defense is relatively, they're average. They're right in the middle in terms of yards allowed. Scoring defense is better than, so they're a little bit of bend not break, but there are some stuff that jumps out at you that are problematic, concerning. Red zone defense for Ole Miss is not unbelievable. Their time of possession, which they don't really care about, that's very low. But the big thing that jumps out to me are the penalties. And it's that's not, at some point Georgia's going to play teams that are not as penalty ridden as like Ole Miss and Missouri have been. But you're coming to Athens. You're averaging about 7 penalties a game. That's just too many, and that will catch up to you. Turnover margin, Ole Miss does a really good job of getting at least a turnover, it seems like, each game. So there's a lot there that's really good. And Lane in his time has been fine. He hasn't been, I don't know if we've seen yet at Ole Miss. We've not. I don't know if we've seen yet his career-defining win. I mean, I'm just going to go through this for a little bit here because, when he was at Tennessee in 2009, that win against Georgia, he talked about that a lot. And that was a big deal for him because that put them, instead of being 3-3, they'd have been 2-4, and they were 2-4 with a bullet after that. I mean, they absolutely hammered Georgia that day, and it was clear that there was a real problem on the defensive side of the ball when you're allowing 45 points and you don't adjust. 2 weeks later, they nearly upset Alabama, by the way. And then, of course, he left and went to SC. I think he had, they beat Oregon, a number 4 Oregon. I think that game was at home. Yeah, no, it was on the road, excuse me. So he knows what it's like to go on the road and win big games. But it's not like that's happened a lot. At SC, he was fired on the tarmac or whatever that was. They beat Stanford. That game was at home. That was number 5 Stanford 10 years ago. But in the SEC, in SEC play, he's only been at Ole Miss for 4 years. And year 1 was kind of not great for them. I mean, they allowed a lot of points. They scored a lot of points. Their best win was over number 11 Indiana in the Outback Bowl. In 21, they beat Arkansas. They beat A&M. Those were both ranked teams. Both of those games were at home. And then they, in 22, they beat. I remember this game. Playing this game was in the same day Georgia and Missouri played in 22. That was the Kentucky game where number 7 Kentucky lost to number 14 Ole Miss. So the Rebels got out to a really good start last year and just sort of collapsed at the end. I don't think we're going to see that this year from Ole Miss. They kind of can't collapse now. I mean, if you lose to Georgia, that's not a collapse. So they're very much looking at either 11-1 or 10-2 right in the face. Them losing to Ole Miss. Ole Miss losing to State. I just don't. I don't know about that. But their season has been. There have been moments that have been challenging. I mean, they have not played unbelievable on the road. I mean, at Tulane, that game was tighter than the 17-point win. They had to pull away from that. And you get credit for that. When they played Alabama, they just were suffocated by that Alabama defense. That could happen this weekend. We'll see. Bama won that game 24-10. And then, sticking with on the road here, because this will be their 4th road game at Auburn. That game with Ole Miss, I think Auburn scored late to get that game within 7, but Auburn was just kind of hanging around the whole time. And it was, the West can really have some challenging games. Yeah. Auburn scored a touchdown with a minute to go. I mean, it wasn't really, but that game was tied at the half, and Ole Miss was only up a touchdown going into the 4th quarter because they scored on the last play of the 3rd quarter. So, Jackson Dart did not have a great night that night, but Junkins did with 124 yards on 21 carries. So this Ole Miss team has plenty enough weapons, has plenty enough talent, etc., to win this game, but they're just going to have to go do it. I failed to mention earlier in the whatever this is called video. It's not a show, is it? About our friends from Eco Poly. Check this table out. You can have this at Christmas. It's a very sturdy, it's a 60-pound table that you can have on your deck, at your dock. This will survive the elements. 20-year warranty, made of completely recycled plastics in the heart of Georgia. Our friends in Eco Poly down in Eastman. This is the sort of stuff that you're going to want. You can't put this under your Christmas tree, okay? But maybe you it doesn't take much to build them either, by the way. I've seen that process too. It's not a lot. But these are great products. We're not going to come on here and not show you great products. I mean, we talked about Dogstruction, Double Dogs, talked about our friends at Red Zone. I mean, we're not going to come on here and give you stuff that's not what we would use. Well, we do use this. You can see it. Look, I'm sitting in it literally right now. You see the two-tone? Take advantage. The link is down below, 15% off and free shipping with the code that I've got down below. Lane Kiffin's playing Possum right now. You know, and maybe that's the way to be about this. I don't know. But Georgia should take Ole Miss abnormally seriously. This is a critical game. You win this game, and you know you have two very good wins in the season with Missouri and Ole Miss. I don't think Ole Miss is losing more than one game the rest of the way. So they'll be a top 10, top 15 team at the end of the season. That will be a very good win for Georgia if they win. You've got Missouri, who still has a challenging close, but honestly, Missouri should win all of their games too. So if you're Georgia, and if these things continue to happen, if you win and the two teams you are playing or just played win out, you're going to be undefeated with wins over top 15 or top 10, Missouri and Ole Miss, and you'll have an Alabama game likely to set you up. So if Georgia's 13-0 with those wins and things, you know, matriculate the way that I'm talking about, they'll be the number one. And why will that matter? That would matter in this scenario. Now, it's not the end of the world. Like, you know, if you're the 2 or the 3, it doesn't matter if you're the 2 or the 3. That's only about, are you wearing dark tops or light tops? In the case of, are you number 1 or are you number 2? That matters because you're picking where you're going. You know, Georgia's not going to pick going to the Rose Bowl. I mean, that would be there's no scenario where that happens. I'd love to go back to the Rose Bowl, but I mean, I just don't see where Georgia would choose to go to Los Angeles to play a home playoff game when you could go play at the place that's been hosting SEC champions since 1976. So I think that the Sugar Bowl's relationship with Georgia's your ability to drive from Atlanta to New Orleans. I think this is probably for another video, and we got a long way to go before all this stuff plays out anyway. But I'm curious what Michigan and Ohio State would do if they were the one. Would they go to Pasadena? I'm not sure they would, for sure. I mean, I don't think it's 100%, I guess is what I'm trying to say. The Sugar Bowl for Georgia, yeah, I think that's like 99.8%. It's way up there. But, you know, New Orleans from Columbus, Ohio is not that, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, you can drive. It might not be an easy drive, but you can drive it. I'm looking it up right now. It's probably a pretty decent drive. Yeah, it's 13 hours, so that's not great, but you're not driving to Los Angeles from Columbus, Ohio. So it speaks to, I think in that scenario, if you're going to fly no matter what, they may well pick California. And it might, you know, the other thing about, you know, so I do suspect, we'll see, it could be Alabama. I do suspect Georgia will be in the playoff. But like, there's sorts of little stuff too about like, what time do we get back? Like that was a big complaint from Georgia in 2017 when Alabama was the 4, and so Clemson obviously picked New Orleans. I mean, so Bama played the late game and was back home quicker than Georgia was, and Georgia played the early game, but they were playing in California. So I think Alabama got a slight jump on them. I don't know how much. But that's the sort of stuff that people think about too. In this scenario, Georgia would totally want to be in New Orleans. You'd get back to Athens. At 3 o'clock Eastern in the morning rather than 6. Like you'd be able to sleep. And, you know, you wouldn't lose that day. Well, they lost that day in 2017. So, and they had a condensed calendar then too. I think the calendar is condensed this year too. I'm going to continue to rant about this just for a second because I don't know what day. Yeah, it's on the 8th. So it's 7 days after you play. I mean, that's a quick turnaround. They've gotten better with this. But I mean, I think in 2017, for the 17 season, I'm going to go back, stick with me. And I know some of y'all don't really care about this, but I'm just trying. Sometimes I try to piece things together. Yeah, that game was on the same. It's the same scenario in terms of travel. So the only difference with that game that was good was that Georgia could practice at home, and they did. I think Alabama did as well. So Georgia practiced their college football playoff practice was in Athens, and they opened that up. They had to. God knows they wouldn't, but they opened that up. And in this scenario, you're going to Houston, so they'd fly to Houston, I think, on Friday, and they'd play on Monday because there's some responsibilities on Saturday. They actually might travel on Saturday, whoever these teams are that play for the national championship. But I think this is all mandated. So that's the other thing. Why do you want to be the one? Well, you want to be the one so you can get rest. So you can turn around, so you can play in New Orleans. And, that's another reason why, like Michigan, Ohio State, they may well pick it too. Now, UW, Oregon. So who we got left? We got Florida State, Georgia, Alabama, UW, Oregon, Ohio State, Michigan. I'll put Penn State in there too, but that's not happening. So that's basically who you've got. And I mean, like someone like Ole Miss could back into it in some weird way. That's all out there. So anybody in the Central or Eastern time zone is going to pick in the South, particularly. So Georgia, Florida State, and Alabama would all pick the Sugar Bowl, no question. I don't know what would happen with Ohio State and Michigan. They might pick the Sugar Bowl just because of the turnaround I'm talking about. That's very possible too. But sorry I ranted so long. This video really was about Lane Kiffin and all the danger that he and the Rebels have coming up, posing the danger towards Georgia on Saturday night. But it's easy to kind of think about what the future is, but Georgia's got to think about Saturday.